Hello, and welcome to the New Rules of Sex Summit. My name is Dr. Lauren Bram, and I am so excited today to welcome Dr. Saida Desilet, founder of the Desilet Method and author of a new book called Desire. Welcome.
Oh, it's so exciting to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to dive into your new book, but I want to first ask you about your method. So you founded a method. Can you tell us about it and what it does for women?
Yeah, absolutely. So the method was founded because I actually had like a life-threatening experience that led to how do you heal this? How do you heal post-rape that's like leading to, death through, it was just a very traumatic experience. And so what started to happen is I took myself through a very organic healing process that was very thorough. And of that, developed this method that I then tested, around the world, tried and true with many women. And over, I guess it's been 20 years now. It's kind of wild. So just refined it. And now it's being taught to gynecologists and naturopaths and just a lot of amazing professional women who want to bring this method. And the method's basically, the idea behind it is that psycho, meaning like your emotional self, your psychology, your the conscious part of you is not separate from your sexuality. And so when we look at any physical imbalances or issues that are happening there, we also need to address how you feel about it and what you believe in your heart. So it's a very integrative method. Many years later, I found out that it's an amazing method to help prepare women for birth and post-birth recovery, for all the menopausal issues. There's so many amazing things that it can address. And so I'm very excited to bring that forward into the world.
Yeah, that's actually what got me into sexuality as well, seeing that there was this divide. I was training to be a midwife for a year, and I saw that no one was having a conversation with women about their consciousness around sexuality, how they felt about it. It was just like they just responded to vaginas like, well, just give them a probiotic, have them wear cotton underwear, and if you have no desire, oh, well, that's normal. You had a baby, or that's normal, you're a woman, or, and I just like my jaw's on the ground listening to this going, I can't be a part of a system that works this way. And so I broke off and did my own thing. And I imagine your work started to heal yourself and help women who had experienced rape and assault, but I imagine that most women need this
absolutely
method.
Yeah. A lot of my students are like, how come this isn't mandatory training for young women, at 15, 16, 17 years old of age, to really have them understand from the get-go that they're sexually sovereign and kind of give them a very strong foundation of first deeply knowing and mastering their own body, their sexuality, their sensuality. It's for me, it's a life skill, this methodology. Yes.
And can you talk more about that word sovereignty and what that means for you?
Yeah. So sovereignty, if you look at a country, like a sovereign country, it's autonomous, it's its own authority, it makes its own choices. So sexual sovereignty is having the full autonomy, the capacity to choose about your pleasure, your fertility, anything really to do with your body, and that no person, no doctor, no government, no institution, nobody, not even your partner, has the right to make those choices for you. That's where that came from. And then I started to realize actually all humans, men, women, everybody are born sexually sovereign, and it's just not in the collective. So now I'm speaking a lot about this.
Yeah, we've talked about that in some of the other interviews, how that it's deeply unconscious how we hand over our sovereignty. And I work with women all the time who just handed it over to the doctor or to whoever their sexual partner is, or, I think there's such a long history of us not having sovereignty over our bodies and our sexuality. And so there has to be this reclamation and this coming to consciousness. And it sounds like your method does that. So how do Jade eggs play into this? And, when you go to your Facebook page, there's a bunch of women smiling, grins ear to hear with their egg. What are these eggs? What do they do?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So many years ago, I just want to give a little background history because I'm one of those less domesticated people than the most. Okay. So my eroticism and my erotic innocence was very intact, which meant that I was really attuned to pleasure and sex, and I loved it. But I was kind of going out of control because as a young woman, there was no place for me to understand that power. And so a teacher came to me and said, if you don't learn to harness this properly, you will end up hurt. You will end up injured. And so the Jade egg came into my life at that point. It comes from a Taoist lineage. But the way it was being taught, my body totally rejected it. I mean, just imagine for a second, there I am standing, trying to put this thing in, and I'm in a horse stance because that's how it used to be taught. And the thing would just go flying across the room, like, boom, like, oh my God. But I knew there was something there.
Mm-hmm.
So the method that I created, I said, well, why don't I just lie down? Then there's no gravity. So the Jade egg is an internal vaginal tool. So it's a piece of nephrite jade in the shape of a little egg. Mm-hmm. We insert it. It has incredible results physically. So like glandular health, the health of the vaginal lining, lubrication, and the health of the different layers of the pelvic floor, because you start to learn and actually build neural pathways of consciousness and sensation. So you're literally like accessing a greater and greater pleasure potential, which is very exciting, but only if it's done correctly. So that's been kind of my pet peeve, I guess, with the explosion of the Jade egg is it's treated like a sex toy or a gym activity. And those two things for me strip women of their sexual dignity, because it doesn't take into consideration their heart and the tender aspects and the vulnerable aspects of what it means to open fully to pleasure and to surrender to it and really have ownership of that.
Yeah, I think I saw one of your videos about what to do, what it means when the Jade egg keeps slipping out, and you sort of just spoke to that a little bit. But can you talk about why there's so much emotion and consciousness and intuition present in our vaginas, and how we, tune into that or respect that?
Absolutely. So I actually feel like the whole body is like that. But there's something very beautiful and unique about choosing the womb and the vagina and our genitals as a place to anchor our consciousness, mainly because historically this area we disassociate. We're trained from very young. As a little girl, we're literally trained to not feel anything. There's a lot of arousal cues that are very important for women to pay attention to. These are trained out of us. We don't even know we're turned on when we're turned on. So there is an emotional factor, because, I mean, imagine being able to enter someone's body. That's profound. It's not a little thing. And we treat it like it's a commodity and it's this currency. This is sacred. This is like, for me, I'm always amazed, like, wow, like we open, like we literally let something in. So the practice of the egg, this particular practice, what that does is allow a woman to more fully integrate a right relationship with how she perceives herself as a woman, as a sexual being, as a sensual being. And that cannot be separated from her feelings. If you've had pain, or you've been betrayed, or things happen and you're angry, your vagina is going to talk. It's going to get like a yeast infection or a bladder infection, or, it's just not going to be happy. It's going to get inflamed, whatever. These are very important signals. And because we're enculturated to not read those signals, then of course, as you said earlier, we'll go to a doctor and give all our power there, and then we get surgeries or medications, and again, more disassociation. So it's very important to me that women recognize you are your vagina and your vagina is you. Like, there's not a disconnection. It's not just this thing.
Yeah, it's a little microcosm and a mirror. And I heard in Chinese medicine, they say literally a lot of the emotions and things just float down to this basin that sits there. And I've had so much work through emotion in my pelvis or vaginal tissue that isn't related to sex at all. And, before I gave birth, I did work, and in my cervix was just fears around being a mother, and was I going to be a good mother? And, I think we sometimes think it's all about sex, but it's really...
Sex is like 1% of being a sexual being. So I want to establish that right now, that let's let go of this idea that we're sexual doings and that the act of sex is sex. We're sexual beings. Wherever we go, our genitals go. I mean, I don't, unless you have like figured out a way to leave your genitals on the bedside table, but I haven't figured that out yet. So they come with me everywhere. So we're sexual beings, and we're having a very profound, intimate relationship with life, but we're just not cognitive of it. So part of this practice is like recreating that bridge, because women, we're bioengineered to receive. This is a big deal. And the spongy tissue in the vagina, there is something called sexual reflexology. There is a connection between like internal organs and felt feelings. But that spongy tissue, just looking at what does sponge, they absorb, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're in a world that's terrified of sex, that abuses sex, that there's so much stuff around it and stigma.
Mm-hmm.
Of course that we're going to walk around with low grade pelvic tension.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has this. It's inevitable. So how do we learn to soften, to
Mm-hmm.
melt, to open, to allow? This is the work of the modern woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of my questions I wanted to ask was to get you to speak to this cultural narrative that women are supposed to be tight and that childbirth makes them loose and they need to get tight again. You know, what would you say to that narrative?
Yeah, I think it's damaging people, first of all, because it's not understanding how the vagina works. The vagina is not meant to be like squeezing shut all the time. That's incredible pelvic tension.
Mm-hmm.
And what has been found with women who that is a goal and they're working a lot, say with Pilates or other types of exercises, they can be as young as 20 and have incontinence, have stage 3 and 4 prolapses, a severe pain or absolutely zero sensation and no orgasms. So tension is not the solution. Being tight is not the solution. Now, tone is a whole other experience. Tone is like a trampoline. So it gives and it comes back. And we do want to develop that. And that comes from very specific types of exercises, but it's inclusive of softening. The trampoline gives, right? It's not just tight. There's a give. And that's healthy tissue. And then we're not even looking at dexterity. So if we're just tight, that's not that pleasant. But if we can kind of breathe with the vagina and then we're moving it in like this wave-like fashion intentionally, my goodness, the pleasure realms that open for women are outrageous. So post-birth, sometimes there is recovery. Absolutely. And especially if there's been episiotomies or it's been like a very large baby. But I can assure you that when a woman comes back into contact with her pleasure and is able to understand how her pelvis works, there is a full recovery and there's no need for surgeries. And I was such an advocate for tight yoni a long time ago when I first got into this, because I bought into like the cultural meme and I got so tight that no one could have sex with me because I would just literally like drain the blood out of their penis. You know, it's like squeezing so hard that like it was so bad. So I had to learn to soften. And over the years, I've noticed this is a cultural mandate of we're so numbed out that we need extreme sensation just to feel something. When we soften, when we allow something I call relaxed arousal, the practice of relaxed arousal, for both partners is a phenomenal shift in how pleasure can be created and received.
Yeah, hold on one quick sec. I'm just gonna. Yeah, I definitely experienced that when I had some leaps with sexuality and just discovering layers of pleasure and arousal and orgasm. It was when I softened into what I was receiving even more. And the more I would soften, then these things would appear that weren't there before. And I did have a baby vaginally and did have that immediate recovery. And I really believe it was even the ability to soften and allow the baby through is also something that a rigid, tight body is not going to do very easily. And it's always been so interesting to me how some women dilate very quickly and other women it's a very slow process. And so I definitely see how as a culture, this, softening is something we have to work on, but at the same time, we feel like we need to protect and tighten to be safe. So how do we feel safe in a world where, many women claim, oh no, it's not safe enough out there to be soft, to be a receptive female. So what would you say to that?
I would say that we're all lionesses. So as a lioness, what happens is, what I mean by that is we're very powerful, instinctual beings, and we're very connected. When we're disassociated, absolutely, it is not safe to be out there. You're not going to pick up cues. You're not going to notice your environment. You're going to be giving signals of a victim, come and hurt me. I'm scared. I am the prey. But a lioness is not a prey. She occupies her sovereign space so fully that nothing messes with her. And it's part of kind of reversing that psyche of actually the more you're in your body, the more you're sensual, the more you claim and occupy this sovereign space, the safer it becomes. The more you activate this birthing canal, this throat, with clear boundaries, with what you would love, right? You are starting now to create an environment where you can soften and you can have beautiful experiences, and it's within your power to do that. And this is something that we're a wound and victim culture. In fact, I've been called an anti-feminist because I believe that women are powerful. And by adopting this idea that I am sovereign and I am powerful and I matter and my voice matters, these little tiny principles are massive. And that reclamation of your personal space is very important. If things have happened to you and the world has not been safe, it's very important to reintegrate that, because I believe that our greatest wounds are also our greatest points of power, but only if we turn our attention there and face what is it here that's, what's the offering of this experience that I had in my past that does not define me as a woman, but it was a substantial experience. What we've done with our victim experiences is we have identified that that is me, but it's not us. It's a victim experience. So it's a very important shift in the collective for a woman to go, okay, I want to feel safe. To feel safe, I need to understand how to occupy my space. I need to understand how, and I might do it in a clumsy way in the beginning, to have clear boundaries. It might be awkward. You might end up being not a nice girl, but there are certain boundaries when they're crossed that, I'm sorry, they're past the nice girl reaction time.
The lioness is out.
Now you come into the lion's den and you've come in without respect, so I'm going to growl. Right? So this is a very important thing collectively. And so disowning our sexuality, disowning our pleasure, disowning our bodies is what keeps us unsafe. So we have to come back to ourselves and choose to have that deep relationship with ourselves.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So your book Desire that's coming out, what do you think is the thing that people know the least about in regards to desire? What do you think is going to be like the big shocker in the book?
There's quite a few shockers. But one of the main themes is that desirable is an emergent and creative force that you can absolutely trust. The problem is we hijack it. So we tend to live by socially mandated ideals and desires. And the journey is then to reclaim what's really honestly true in your heart and follow that with a ferocity of like, I'm going to live my life as fiercely and fully as I can. So I think that principle, that desire is not evil and it's not this horrible thing that makes us misbehave and it doesn't bring pain and it's not just sexual. There's actually 6 very clear thematic types of desire that show up in our lives. And so I explore those very thoroughly, and they can happen all at once or they can happen sequentially. There's no right or wrong. So to have this amazing relationship, because when you face your own death, as I have, life becomes very precious and you don't want to waste a moment and a drop of it. So when you're living like that, then you realize that you're actually being led. For me, desire, that yearning, that ache that we feel in our hearts for something, that's honest. That's our soul, like speaking right through the cells. Like it's a visceral.
You can't fake it.
No, you can't fake it. And we can cultivate it. We can actually become friends with it. It can become what I call a daemon, which is like an intelligent, like muse that connects us with life itself.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I in talking to women, am often surprised at what a small role desire plays in their lives, and it's so much like duty, and all of these things seem to play a bigger role than desire. And desire with food, desire with sex, like a lot of it feels very confusing to women, or they don't feel like they have it, or they feel like it has betrayed them in some way. So it sounds like this book and this conversation is really, really necessary.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to read it. So where can people find out more about you and get your book?
Yeah, so my website is dareyourdesire.com. And that's about to be completely transformed. So it'll be really interesting when we get that. And there's also something called the Daring project. It's strictly for women only at this point, but it's an online community that is exploring all these topics. How do we actually do this? How do we make it real in their day-to-day moments, not just some extraordinary like workshop-y thing, but like in the micro moments of like the messiness of human life? How do we become more daring? Because daring is essential right now. Apathy is killing us. Daring is the way that we can really claim our own lives and really start to live them in the way that we would love to live them.
Fantastic. And our sexuality too. I mean, when people aren't happy with the experience of their sexuality, it impacts their whole life. And I think a lot of the tools from this summit, again, people don't realize when they work on their sexuality that it translates to every area of life. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Because there is no difference. Sexuality is creative. It's life force. It's aliveness. How alive are you? That's the only question you need to ask yourself day in and day out. How alive am I right now? And if I'm not that alive, what do I need to be more alive? And this will reveal itself. And sometimes it will be sexuality. Sometimes it will be sensuality. But sometimes it's just the need to connect with, I don't know, the mystery and the beauty of life. Sometimes it's the need to contribute. Sometimes it's the need to, have a baby. Like there's so many different things that allow us to access this force.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, that's such a great place to end. Thank you so much for your time today. And hope you all check out Saida's new book, Desire, and we will see you on the next interview. So until then, bye-bye.